Bears' schedule is considered the second toughest. The structure and order of the Bears' schedule is interesting. So last year, with Matt Eberflus and a rookie quarterback, I thought they needed momentum early. Give them an easy schedule early. They had Tennessee week 1, and they won that game, thanks to Will Levis. And that was good because if they started off 0-2, every loss for a coach in the hot seat would be chaos, and you don't want to have a rookie quarterback engulfed with chaos. This year with Chicago, they have to go to Baltimore. They have to go to Detroit. I'd rather get those games out early. Get the San Francisco game out early. At Detroit, at Baltimore. You're probably not going to beat those teams early or late. What I want is, and Ben Johnson is rebuilding the O-line. The O-line is the hardest unit to get cohesion. This offensive line is not going to be great until probably Thanksgiving and later. And by that time, you're going to have a hard enough time beating Detroit and Detroit, Washington and Washington, or Detroit and Detroit, even if you have it. But you know what you would guarantee success? If you're playing the Giants, Cleveland, and New Orleans late in the year, your offensive line with Dahlman and Tooney and this left tackle from BC everybody loves, and all of a sudden it's November, you got the offensive line cooking. Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams are locked in arms. They're seeing the same world, and here come some tomato cans as you're trying to grow and fight for that wild card spot behind Detroit, who has a much better overall roster. So get the losses out of the way. Last year, it's like win early. It's your only chance to avoid chaos. If you started 0-2, it's not ideal, but if Caleb's playing well, and Caleb's improving, and you lose a couple of games late because your defense has holes, you're fine.
Okay. Let's talk about this. Obviously, you guys know I make a ton of Chicago Bears content. And so, this is at the point of the season, point of the off season, I should say, where it's like, what conversations can we have about this team that we haven't already said again and again and again? Like, I literally already just released a video talking about for like the 100th time of like, how great I think Ben Johnson will be with Caleb Williams and how this team has improved from every single category, every single aspect. And, I obviously don't want to have to just keep recycling that again and again and again, although it's, guaranteed to happen because there's only new information, so much new information coming out. But I do think this is an interesting question that Colin didn't necessarily answer, because this is the end of the segment and then he goes into like an interview with something completely unrelated. Expectations for Caleb's first year with Ben. And listen, I think the Chicago Bears and Caleb and Ben Johnson are going to have tremendous success. I am very firm on that. I'm very high on what I believe they will be as a team. But I do think it's interesting to try to ask the question, though, no predictions, nothing like that. Like, what are the actual fair expectations for Caleb with Ben Johnson right now in year one? And I kind of want to answer this question in a couple different ways, because Colin's now talking about like, the momentum, get the hard games out of the way, etc., etc. The reality is that I think there's massive amount of pressure on Caleb Williams, and just a microscope on a magnifying glass on a telescope, just so zoomed in on Caleb and Ben Johnson and the Bears, that every loss, every failure, every moment that just doesn't go well is going to be so zoomed in and magnified. If they lose to the Ravens, no one's going to say, well, it's the Ravens, they're a great team, what do you expect? Like, they're going to be like, let's say even if it's not even like a massive loss, let's just say it's 28-14, 28-21 or something, like, proof Caleb's not the guy, question mark, right? Like, it'll just be on, expecting a better performance from Ben Johnson's first game against the Ravens, question mark, right? Like, it just will always be twisted in a way, rather than being like, hey, they played pretty well, what do you expect? The Ravens have like a 5-year head start, if not more, on a team like the Chicago Bears. And, so I think, like, no matter what the narratives will be against going into these games and the outcomes, the narratives, the deck will be stacked against them for negative narratives. They'll have to work harder for the positive narratives. And I think it was like that. I think it was the opposite, at least in the beginning going into last year. People wanted Caleb Williams and the Chicago Bears team to be so good. They really did. The NFL wanted it. That was all the talk going into the season. Colin said, I think the NFL purposely gave the Chicago Bears an easy schedule. And like, he's like, this is my tinfoil hat theory. And like, I broke it all down. We had all these conversations about it. And I do believe that like there was a ton of hype that they really truly did want Caleb and the Chicago Bears to live up to. Colin had this whole theory that the Chicago Bears need to be great because of the stuff that was going on last year with everything, which I don't really talk about, but he was kind of saying that like, during those years, sports, he said his show kind of, takes a hit during those years, and that, one of the things that could save it is like Aaron Rodgers being great with the Jets and Caleb Williams being great with the Chicago Bears. So this was like a lot of people wanting it to be a thing. Nick Wright talking about them going to the Super Bowl, etc., etc. And now I feel like it's kind of the opposite. Like people, feed off the negativity, they feed off the doubt, and so if anything, it seems like it's a sharper take to be like, I don't think Ben Johnson's going to be that good of a head coach, and I think Caleb Williams is a bust. You guys think he's good. That seems to be more where the energy is, and so I just think that those narratives are kind of already written, and it's up for the Chicago Bears to just, disarm that, disentangle that. And so, I that's why it's like when we talk about momentum or it's okay that if the O-line isn't great until November, like no, like that's from a perception standpoint, there's no way, quite frankly. I personally don't see it that way, which then leads me into like, well, what are the actual expectations for Caleb? And I think the better question is like, what are the fair expectations? What are the realistic expectations? And I'm just going to go bigger picture more than anything. Because when I zoom in more, which I'll also just quickly say, it becomes a little generic and a little bit general, because it is honestly how I feel, and I'm not gonna try to give a really deep sharp take just so I could say I have a deep sharp take, when in reality it's just like I think the general take here is still like, I'm still expecting Caleb to have some really great moments, some bad moments, some moments where you're kind of like, what the heck was that? And some awesome moments. Like I still think it's going to be a little bit of a mixed bag. Like that is what I think is totally fair. I think you're going to get a little bit of everything. It's his second year, and I really see it as his first year, because I've said this when we were near the end of last season, before the season officially ended. I said, I'm punting this with Caleb Williams. I'm like, I'm treating next year as his rookie year, because this season was such a mess. I don't really know how much development and growth and evolution he was really going to be able to get through this season. And so I'm just like, I'm treating year two really, really as year one, and I have no issues with that. And so that takes me to like expectations. Well, you have a quarterback who, yes, technically he's in his second year, but the first year was such a mess. Don't count that. And now you have a first year head coach. You do have a lot of new pieces. And so for me, what are realistic expectations? It's like just reaching the playoffs. But if they don't reach the playoffs, it's not because they're just clearly inferior or bad and you're just like, oh my gosh, what are we doing here? You don't make the playoffs because there's just too many good teams, and you are behind those teams just because a lot of these other teams, they've already been developed. They've already are solidified with their quarterback, with their coaching staff, with the meat of their roster. We got teams that have established themselves and have momentum. The Eagles, the Commanders, the Rams, even in your own division, the Lions, the Packers, like those teams in theory should be better than the Bears. They've been doing it for longer. They have more continuity and stability. They don't have to learn things and create something out of nothing, which is what the Chicago Bears have to do. So I would still be okay with them not making the playoffs. I think it would be a little bit bummer, and I think they should make the playoffs, but I just think that with the schedule being what it is, and it is a tougher schedule, although I've done the math and said like I clearly see wins here as well. But I just look at it where it's like, okay, if I was really forced to be like, what expectations could I have for the Bears that I wouldn't be like, okay, they underperformed, or like this was a true letdown. Again, it would be like at least just make the playoffs. Ideally, if you're not going to win, not be rocked, right? Not be like, okay, you clearly were not a playoff team here, but like you still made it. Like that's, you know, that's kind of like a silver lining for sometimes, like how the Broncos ended up getting rocked by the Bills. You're like, all right, you know, I kind of something, but you know, a little bit of a letdown, kind of a silver lining to a degree. But yeah, I really think at the end of the day, just making the playoffs, getting back there, having at least a competitive game, unless again you're going up against the team that ends up winning the Super Bowl in the wild card round or something like that, where it's kind of like, okay, you're going up against a juggernaut right now. No one's really expecting you to win. It just is what it is. And like I said, if they miss the playoffs, it can't be because like they only won 5 wins, and you're like, well, hey, they did a little bit better. It would be like, no, you won 10 wins, 9 wins. You played great. You lost a couple tough games, but you are right there. Next year, we're expecting a big step forward. This is exciting. We're all clearly on the right path. We know this. Ben Johnson is clearly the guy. Caleb is clearly the starting quarterback in the NFL. And we're going to now build off this momentum. Excited for another free agency. Excited for another draft. And let's go. I think that's ultimately what the expectations are at the end of the day. It's how do you feel at the end of the season? Are you like, all right, we got it. We got the coach. We got the quarterback. We got the future. Boom. This is what we need in free agency. This is what we're going to look for in the draft. So-and-so is available. We have the X pick, so we're going to be able to look for this. We definitely need that. Like, there's just some excitement, some juice, some momentum. To me, that's what the expectations are, right? You feel that you have momentum and that you're excited actually for year 3 or year 2 with Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams. That's the foundation of my expectations. And that's ended up happening exactly with the Denver Broncos for the most part. They were able to find themselves in the playoffs. You felt Sean Payton, Bo Nix, they're the duo. Let's go. You were excited for the offseason. You were excited for the draft. You're excited for the momentum going into the next season. And then the rest is just up to see what they do, right? The rest is up to the players and the coaching staff. And it's like, all right, you know, meet those expectations. Take that next step. Take that next level. When you really look at it, it's like over the last, you know, X amount of years, ultimately, that is what the Bills have done. That is what the Ravens have done. That is what the Eagles, like, that was their trajectory, right? It wasn't like year 1, year 2, boom, Super Bowl MVP, let's party. Like, it wasn't necessarily like that. So I'm not going to lump that on Caleb Williams and the Chicago Bears just because, right? Like, you know, I don't think that, but yeah, but just kind of through the you know, the view that I'm kind of looking at all of this right now. And of course, all of that can change. It's like, you know, if they get off to an insanely hot start and they're 8-2 or something, it's like, okay, well, now my expectations are a lot more. If I look around the league and I clearly see like, this isn't as talented, this isn't as potent of a season as I thought it was going to be. Like, the Bears are definitely in a position now. I would be upset if they don't at least get to the divisional round or, you know, something like that. So all of it is subject to change. But, you know, when we're having this conversation in May, you kind of just got to, you know, work with what you got. But those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about the Chicago Bears? What are your expectations for Caleb's first year with Ben? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment, so whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions, let's get in some fights, but ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We're building an amazing community here, and I absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to. Something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to doing it. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.